All right, we will get started here. Thanks everyone so much for joining our MWEE Practitioner Webinar Series. Looks like many folks are familiar faces today that have joined us before, but if you haven't, welcome. Please know that we are recording this webinar, so in order to kind of protect everybody's privacy, please at this time shut off your video and just double check to make sure that you're muted. We will be posting these videos like we always do on the Bay Program's YouTube channel on the playlist called MWEE Practitioners. If you haven't been there before, you can check it out and find dozens of other videos that we've recorded through these webinar series on everything from curriculum integration to student-directed action, as well as some really cool kind of science content pieces around fisheries and oysters and everything in between. So, so just know that you can access this afterwards, and you're welcome to share that resource with other teachers or educators that you're working with. We have three amazing presenters with us today, and we'll be able to ask them questions throughout the presentation. They're each going to be taking a couple of minutes to describe their tools and resources, and we'll hopefully be able to pitch them questions from the chat in between those times. At the end of the webinar, we will stop recording and make it so that you all can come off mute if you'd like to ask verbal questions as well. So know that those options are there. Please feel free to use the chat actively. And before we get started, I just wanted to share a couple of other upcoming opportunities that are out there. They can all be accessed at that link at the very bottom, which we can also pop into the chat. Maybe Bart or Krista could help me out with that. The first one is our Mid-Atlantic Climate Change Education Conference this summer. All these are this summer, actually. This will be our second year going into that with a variety of great partners, some of whom are on the phone with us today. This is for teachers and educators. It's June 28th to July 1st, and there is a brand new option for students to also participate in a student track, so be sure to check that out. We also have our Climate Institute that we're doing in partnership with Climate Generation and the NOAA Climate Office. We'll be hosting a Mid-Atlantic cohort July 28th to 30th. And then our Go-To Tote workshop, which is always really popular for middle and high school teachers, will be taking place July 26th to July 30th. And then finally, in partnership with MSDE and Washington College, we have our Building Your Climate Data Story, and that's specifically for teachers also. So really great lineup of workshops. Feel free to check them out. Registration for all of these is open now. Dorian, if you can move us to our next slide here so that I can move forward with the crux of this presentation. And our topic for today is accessing and using data in the context of MWEEs. And so as everybody here knows, you know, the Meaningful Watershed Educational Experience, there's a variety of different ways that data can be used in that. It's a way to understand local environmental issues. During a MWEE, students may access existing historical data sets. They may also engage in the process of actually collecting their own data and then using that ultimately. Data are important pieces of evidence that students can use to make claims and ultimately inform action. So what we're going to hear today is kind of going to be a little bit of a whirlwind of the different tools and resources that you may consider using. And I'll just say that, you know, in the kind of promotion for this, you saw the websites and you were able to maybe play around with them a little bit. This is just a primer, and so if you have questions, I think each of our presenters today would be willing to chat with you afterwards if you're interested in using these resources. And so without further ado, I will pass this over to Dorian, who's going to first introduce GLOBE.
Well, thank you very much. And can you hear me okay? You can just give me a thumbs up if it's all good. Wonderful. Hey, so I'm actually joining you today from the Chesapeake Bay, and I was inside looking out the window and I thought, you know, I think I can set things up so that I've got the bay behind me, and that would be much more appropriate for this presentation. So thank you for letting me come and join you today. I'm Dorian Janney. I am a NASA Earth Science Senior Education and Outreach Specialist, and I had the responsibility and pleasure of being a classroom teacher for over 30 years and live to tell about it in both the Montgomery County and the Frederick County Public Schools. So what I'm here to talk to you about today is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's called the GLOBE program. This is a fascinating program because it involves countries from all over the world. We have 125 different countries that are involved, actively engaged with the GLOBE program, and then you can see all the other stats there as well. For those of us who have the pleasure of working with diverse groups of students, this is also a wonderful opportunity. We have lots and lots of resources in different languages, as well as the opportunity to be interacting on a regular basis with people from all these other countries. So we've got two different kind of tendrils to the GLOBE program. It used to just be the formal education program, which focuses on these protocols that you can do with your students and was more focused on formal education. There, about 4 or 5 years ago, we realized that everybody's walking around with this amazing data collector in their pocket, and we might as well go ahead and capitalize on that and teach folks how to do citizen science using their smartphone. So that's what I'm going to be telling you a little bit about today. We have 4 different tools. So what I'm hoping to do is show you some tools that you can put into your tool belt of teaching, and hopefully find some of these are really, really excellent ways to engage your students in utilizing their smartphone or iPad technology for better understanding our home planet. This is also sponsored by NASA, which is kind of cool, and by NOAA as well, and the Department of State, because, and as I'll show you as we get into some of these tools, many NASA satellites, including the one that I work for, which focuses on global precipitation, many NASA satellites are studying Earth, and they're studying various environmental parameters on Earth, and they're collecting the data from space. So when we can get people to also collect that data from the ground, it makes our data set so much richer, and it also affords scientists the opportunity of having this ground truthing done. So there are 4 tools right now in the Globe Observer app, and I hope you will download the app. It's free. You only have to enter your email the first time you use it, and they give you a passcode. And then every time after that, when you open it up, it just opens up right away to the app, and you are ready to get going with the tools. When you open this up and see the tools, you have a choice of doing whichever tool you feel like doing. You don't have to do all 4, and I'm just going to give you a quick little tutorial on each of these tools. But I will tell you that each tool has a rich background behind it, and I believe you have been sent these story maps that I created for each tool that talks about the science behind the tool, the various NASA satellites that are helping us to better understand the parameters that we're looking at here, and gives you a lot more information and various resources that you can use if you decide you want to get out there and utilize this tool with your students and your classroom and your family. So one of these tools is called the clouds. And basically you take this and you go outside. You could do it from your window, but it's much better to go outside. It's best in the best of all possible worlds if you're able to see, 180 degrees around you. But if you're not, it is completely fine. I take cloud pictures from where I am here. I collect cloud observations, and I just stand over there at the edge of the bay. And of course, when I'm kind of looking toward the house, I'm getting some tree coverage there as I'm taking my pictures, but that's totally okay. So get out there and try the cloud tool. With this one, basically what you're doing is you're guesstimating about how many clouds you see in the sky as you look all around you. Today, as I'm out here, I would probably say that this sky is clear. So in any case, you're guesstimating that, and you can see down at the bottom right, that is one of my cloud observations that I took. Then you're looking at the sky color. You're looking at the visibility, gives us kind of a feel for the amount of aerosols that may be in the sky and the amount of water vapor. You're looking for contrails and giving some information about those. And this triangle here is showing us that when you're looking at clouds, it's kind of location, location, location. You're noting about where in the sky you think those clouds are. And I'll tell you, that takes some practice. It doesn't come along super easily to be able to figure that out. But it's a wonderful way to have your students and yourself out there and engage in some of that rich argumentation and trying to understand and figure out where those clouds are located. And then, of course, you take pictures. And with this app and all 4 of the tools, We really stress that we don't want selfies when you're taking these pictures. It's okay, as you see in the far bottom right hand there, if you happen to take a picture of your shoes, but we're really working to respect confidentiality. Now, here's a cool thing. When you use the cloud tool, and it's only for this tool that we have satellite matching, you will get an email a few days after you have taken your observation, and it will have your observation over there you can see in green. And then depending on which satellites were up collecting data around the same time, it will also give you what the satellite found. So you can kind of compare and contrast what you found to what the satellite found. The tool that I like to work with, and that I have done all kinds of work with, is the Mosquito Habitatmapper. I happen to have here a huge plastic mosquito with me because I do a lot of work with mosquitoes. And basically, this is a really, really neat tool. What you're doing in this case, as my friends, these are some of my neighbors here, were demonstrating, you're taking your smartphone, you're finding something. In this case, it was my water uh, uh, container that I used to give my flowers their water, my pitcher, and it had water in it. So they were just taking a picture of it because they saw standing water that could potentially be a mosquito breeding habitat. Why are we worrying about mosquitoes? Well, it turns out mosquitoes are the world's most dangerous animal. And even here in the United States, we need to be concerned about some of the vector mosquitoes. We don't need to worry that much about nuisance mosquitoes other than just being annoyed because they bite us and it itches. However, unfortunately, many of the mosquitoes that are able to transmit diseases are starting to be more common in the continental United States, and certainly in Maryland, we have seen many more of these vector mosquitoes showing up. So basically what you do with this, and all the steps are in each of these tools. Like I say, there's the tutorial, and if you look at the story map, it'll have all kinds of cool information. Doesn't have to be active mosquito season. You're just taking pictures of where there's standing water. If you can, you empty that water out if you happen to see mosquito larvae, or just as a good practice, unless that water is needed for like a bird bath or for dogs or horses. So it's a really neat tool. I hope you'll get out there and give it a try. And absolutely fabulous to use to support MWEEs. Basically, what you can do is have your students every Monday, Mosquito Monday, I like that little mnemonic there, have them walk around their school area, or it could be walking around their homes, and just take pictures of standing water to get in the habit of recognizing where we're inadvertently creating potential habitats for mosquitoes. So they could do that once a week. When they start to find that there's various human created potential mosquito habitats, they could work with their school community and help them to understand why it's important to continually monitor these habitats and make sure during active mosquito season that you're either treating the habitats or emptying the water. And let's see, let me go to my next slide. Okay. Okay, then we have another tool called land cover. Land cover, basically, you're just going out, you're trying to find areas where you can see, say, about a football field ahead of you, where the land is kind of homogeneous, but it really doesn't matter. It's fine. You're basically just trying to characterize with pictures what you see north, east, south, and west, and then up and down, to help us better understand how different areas are being changed, and help us to also understand the impact of humans as land cover's changing. That one would be a really nice one for students to do like once a month, or at least maybe once every semester, to get a feel for how the land area around their school is changing, and to get some ideas as they're working on their MWEE for things that they might want to change in order to have a more sustainable school ground. Then the final tool, the fourth tool, is called tree height. This one's really fun. You're basically just standing back, looking at a tree, and using this clinometer that is in a smartphone. You are aiming your phone at the bottom of the tree, and it walks you through how to do it. And then the top of the tree, and then you're walking to the tree, and it's using trigonometry there to be able to determine the height of the tree. And so this is just giving you a feel for when you're doing your tree observation, You will just come on with any of these different tools. You click on the tool and you click that you're going to be doing an observation, and then it walks you through the rest of it. So a really, and this is showing you some of this the directions, some of that kind of tutorial here. Each time you use it, it walks you through very quickly how to do this, and then bingo, you get your data. So as you collect this data, it is maintained on a map. It also is maintained. You'll have once you go onto the Globe Observer website and you've entered you've signed in, then all the time you can see your observations. You can see if you set up a team with your students, all of their observations, and you can also go on here and see observations from all over the world, and then they can use that data to compare and contrast what they're finding in wherever you're located with perhaps where their mother came from or where they had recently come from, or you are trying to better understand climates and different ecosystems based on some of the curriculum that you're working on. So I am going to stop there with that. That is the end of my presentation. And I want to make sure that I push the right thing for stopping sharing. And hopefully the next person can jump on
Yeah,
and
thank
take
you.
over.
Thank you so much, Dorian.
You bet.
And I don't see any specific questions in the chat, but we do have a minute to take one if anybody does have one. So feel free. I'll give maybe a couple of seconds while I'm transferring the presenter mode over to Sean to give people the chance to ask any questions if they're coming to mind.
And Elise, thank you for putting those story maps up. I hope that you'll get in there and interact with those story maps, and you know, feel free to share them to basically help you have a little more information about each of those tools, because I have spent entire days just teaching about one tool, and here in 10 minutes I'm trying to condense it. So cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Age
Well,
range.
we do have one question that just came into the chat. Sorry, Sean, just before you get started. What age range are the Globe apps really targeted for?
Excellent question, Denise. Basically, anyone can use them. I have used them with my 3-year-old granddaughter. She loves to do the Mosquito Habitatmapper and help with the clouds, and she also really, really likes to do the tree height. However, we ask that students are 13 or over in order to open up their own account. You know, again, to be respectful of confidentiality. But I feel that you will find as you're working with your students, if you have, say, an iPad, you can go ahead and, you know, put the Globe Observer on there and then send them out with the iPad around the schoolyard. They do not have to have internet connectivity to collect the data. They only need the internet connectivity when they come back and whenever they're ready to send that data in. And you can always edit the data if you found that they got pictures of themselves, you know, because we don't accept pictures that are, you know, that are of people, or if it was something that wasn't data, you always have access to be able to get rid of the submission before you send it. But get in there and play with this, folks. Don't worry that you're going to hurt anyone's doctoral dissertation. We really want to get citizen scientists collecting data, and the only way to learn how to collect data is by getting in there and doing it. And you'll never be contacted and told that you know, your data isn't good. It is we go through and we scrub the data, so you don't have to worry about it.
Thank you for reassuring. That's really helpful. All right, Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, yeah, and thank you, Dorian. Those, I love like the 4 targeted, isolated, different activities you can do within the Globe Observer program. They're all so fun. And I want to share with you a bit about our FieldScope platform. And when we were doing our introductions on the chat as part of the webinar, I recognized some folks on the webinar. So some folks have sort of known about our tool for a long time, I think I can say. And hopefully today I'll get to share with you some new things about it. And just for reference, fieldscope.org is the website where you can kind of find out more about the Chesapeake Watershed project I want to share with you on today, and other projects. So just some quick context and history. We actually first sort of developed what became FieldScope. It was developed out of Northwestern University in conjunction with the GLOW program. So going way back, have all these this interconnected history. And then I first became involved with FieldScope at the National Geographic Society, headquartered in Washington, D.C. in the Chesapeake Watershed. about 2008, so going way back now. And at that time, we had created a tool to allow classrooms, nature centers, and others to be able to add water quality data that they've gone out and collected, and then be able to engage with the data and look at it alongside maps and in other styles of visualization. So we actually initially built FieldScope specifically to support, really to support MWEEs in the watershed and other MWEE-like experiences that were going on. And then once we had built it, we said, wow, this is kind of a neat tool we've built. I wonder if we can extend it so that it could easily be picked up and put down in other regions for citizen science water quality, or other types of citizen science would be able to use it. And we were successful in receiving some funding from the National Science Foundation at that time to do that. And then in 2016, the FieldScope tool that we built at Nat Geo moved over to another nonprofit, which is based in Colorado, called BTS Science Learning. And then this year, we were able to launch a new version of it that was updated, enhanced, and mobile friendly. And then I'm actually coming to you today from the mouth of the Narragansett Bay. I'm not in the Chesapeake Bay watershed. I'm in the Narragansett Bay watershed up in Rhode Island. But I lived in Washington, D.C. for a long time and worked with educators across the Chesapeake region. So FieldScope, what is it used for? It's a tool that can be used by citizen science, community science projects that have people enter data that is based in sort of points on the earth with lat long, and data that can be represented in numbers or lists or open text or different kinds of media, any kinds of data that can be tied to points on the earth. It's also a tool for exploring and analyzing data and maps and graphs. I'll show you a little bit of that. And also for managing a project. So managing data coming in from participants and members, and managing that list of members. And then what I think is maybe the most fun and exciting part, being able to take all that data that gets added to a project, and whether you're sort of thinking in a project lead mode or in an educator mode or a student mode, being able to analyze and visualize the data, create artifacts of that data, and save and share them. And I'll show you a little bit about that. So FieldScope is used by a bunch of different kinds of citizen science projects across North America. And I'm going to focus on the Chesapeake Watershed project as it's most relevant for this webinar today and for this audience supporting MWEEs in that region. So like I said, it's about data collection. So when I say that, what data do I mean? Well, you can see there are a lot of options. When you sign on and have an account on the Chesapeake Watershed project, you have options to share atmospheric observational data that's been collected, physical water quality data that's been measured, and chemical, macroinvert survey data, some things on riffle and stream bank composition, and also multimedia. So it's pretty unlikely that any one group is going to go out on any one day and collect all of these things. And you don't have to collect all of these things. You might go out with a group and want to make some atmospheric observations, and using just a few kinds of tools and observational protocols, you can contribute that data. You could actually just contribute multimedia photos, right? If you want to sort of track a study site over time from that visual perspective. So there's a lot of flexibility in all the types of data that can be entered. And that is, just something to be aware of, that it's not all required. So who can add data to this project? Well, really anyone collecting water quality data or some of these other atmospheric data streams can contribute their results to the project, as long as you're within the Chesapeake Watershed boundaries. And it's just a free account to have. Often in classroom contexts, whether it's a middle school group or an informal ed kind of group, they'll often share an account, so students don't have to create their own. Maybe you'll go out and have groups of students doing water quality testing. You'll come in and maybe work through as a class, coming up with doing some vetting of data and coming up with one class set of data. But also I'm excited to share that later this year, we're rolling out a new feature that'll actually allow groups within a classroom to securely enter their data attached to their teacher. So right now, the best you could do is like the teacher could just give out their account information to all the different groups, which some people wouldn't be that comfortable with. But we'll have a system where a teacher can say, great, we're going out to monitor here on this day, and I need 6 data sheets, and then each of those data sheets will just have a link that students can go to add their data. So pretty excited about that. And also, when you sign up for an account on the project, you have to include a school or organization name. And I just wanted to highlight, and this kind of segues into what's next, that's helpful later on for filtering the data. So you can see in the screenshot here, we have a bunch of different users who have signed up, who are associated with Arlington schools, and then using filtering within the tool. Anyone can go on there and play around with filtering this data. You can say, well, show me all the data contributed by anyone who added their school name or organization name with, Arlington in it. So we talked a little bit about adding data, right? There's all those different parameters, but just as much about adding data, we're really about supporting learners, educators, the public in engaging with data. So I'm going to kind of just take you through a couple screenshots that sort of give you a sense of what that's like. So here, for example, when you click on visualizations and go to create a new one, you're presented with sort of just the most recent data that's been added to the tool. And then from there, you can start to filter in more data and explore data in different styles. And obviously, there's a map here of the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. So that's there's a whole library of maps. There's a little map icon on the right. When you click on that, it shows you all these different options for maps you can turn on and off. When you do have maps on, when you click on the map, it gives you some information about that location. So I have a layer of like land cover here, which is supported by the Globe Observer program that we just learned about. And you can click on the map and say, okay, this spot is cultivated crops, and I am within the Wiki River watershed. So you can learn about the maps, and that'll start to give context to the water quality data. Besides maps, when you go to, if you notice that add a new widget button right there, sort of in the top left under save, when you click that, it brings up a menu where you have all these other options to add other types of displays to this visualization workspace. So for example, you could add a histogram, right? So if you add a histogram, then maybe you want to view sort of salinity on your x-axis. And now you can start to see like the spread and the distribution of salinity data across this data set. And as I'm talking about this, I should mention too, I hope this isn't too confusing, but before, I'm going to actually go back a few slides. When you're adding data to FieldScope, you need an account, right? Either the teacher who can share it with the students or whoever. You need to have an account to add data. But the cool thing is you don't actually need to be logged in to work with data. So obviously that has important implications in the classroom where you don't want to deal with classroom logins. Anyone can go on and play around with this data. So that's really important to know. The only reason you'd want to be signed in when you're working with data is if you don't want to save a visualization and come back to it or share it with someone else. So here is this histogram. I'm not going to go through an example of every graph type. I welcome you to check it out and play around with it. But here I'll just show you how I can start to sort of remix and bring together these different types of visualizations. So now I have that histogram of salinity, but then I played around and I modified my map a little bit so it shows the data according to salinity. So closer to blue is closer to ocean water, closer to this sort of pink, magenta is closer to fresh water. So you can start to see patterns across the watershed of how these parameters might change. And then I also added a summary to this data viz on the average salinity across the data set. And there's all sorts of ways of filtering it by date range, by value, right? Like only show me salinity under a certain amount or equal to this amount. Also by county, by sub-watershed. So in the filter options, there's a whole lot there. And then finally, if I created this, I wanted to share it with my students because I wanted them to do something with it, or I wanted to post it to social media, I could save it to my account if I'm logged in, or students could save it if you want to have them logged in, and they could copy the link, and then you can just paste the link wherever you want to, and someone can load up this visualization that you've created, or even save their own copy of it to kind of tinker themselves. So yeah, I just want to say how to use the Chesapeake Watershed project in a MWEE experience. Well, for one, there are just easy to access maps for exploring watersheds, right? We looked at that watershed boundary layer. You can zoom in, figure out what watershed you're in. We looked at a land cover layer. There are other layers of information and maps you can check out. So just for that, like situating yourself in the watershed, it can be a helpful tool for that. And then of course, a place to add your data and then be able to map it and graph it. And kind of like we just talked about, a tool for even students to create sort of visualization artifacts and be able to share them. And then this last one, I said a resource to build a unit of instruction around, because that's something we've been working on at the nonprofit I'm with at BTS Science Learning. We've had a grant that's funded by Hawaii's BWET program supporting MWEEs in the Hawaiian Islands. And we've partnered with some teachers in that this part of Oahu, as well as folks who work at this coastal fish pond. And we've created a project for that fish pond where the staff as well as visiting students collect water quality data and contribute it here. And then we've built actually a whole 10-lesson unit that has students learning about fish pond management and then going out for a field trip, coming back, working with the data, etc. So I guess a point I want to leave on with that is we have the Chesapeake Watershed project, but FieldScope is set up if you are like, hey, you know what? We're doing this citizen science kind of study, but we're collecting this other data. We'd like to have a FieldScope project. That kind of thing's possible too. That's what we created FieldScope for. But primarily, I figure the closest interest to you may be participating in the existing project that is the Chesapeake Water Quality Project. I think I didn't get to mention everything I wanted to, but that's okay. I think we have a couple questions and my contact information's there.
Thanks so much, Sean. That was an excellent overview. And like I said at the beginning, it's so hard to dig into like all aspects of these tools because they're quite robust. And I don't think that any of our presenters are really able to share the full breadth. But these are just snippets and opportunities to dig in. And I hope you're seeing how, the differences in some of these tools and some of the strengths. And there's a lot of like opportunity to potentially like layer on, using Globe to collect data around land use and then look at land use with your students through FieldScope. So there's, a lot of different synergies here. I know Candace has a great question, and this is a tool I've used too. And I don't know if you've already read it or not, Sean, but the other mapping tool that she's interested in is like the how does water travel from my address to the Chesapeake Bay? And those tools, go ahead.
I love that tool too. And we haven't been able to rebuild it yet when we had to relaunch the tool just this last year. But it's on our list to rebuild this year. So I'm hoping that by like the time 2022 hits and next spring season is here, that tool will be sort of reinstated or rebuilt in the project, because it was really cool, just like Candace is saying in a question, to track where your surface water would flow from your location to the bay, and then also to be able to draw the upstream watershed from your specific location. So super fun tools to play with, and they're sadly just absent at the moment. We're doing our best to rebuild them, but also often with these big tech projects, it can get a little hectic. But in some ways, I feel like that's a great segue to our next presenter, because I know there's a lot of cool similar things within some of the tools we're going to hear about next.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sean. And I'll just reiterate, like, I have personally heard the value of that tool multiple times. And I think it really helps to connect, MWEEs that are happening upstream, and whether it's Pennsylvania or out in further in Virginia. And making those sorts of connections through that tool has been really helpful for students to be able to visualize that. But you're very right that what Steve's about to present with us next about Wiki Watershed, there are some really cool pieces that also kind of get towards that a little bit. So Steve, I will turn it over to you, and your screen looks great.
All right, can you hear me? The volume, yes. Can you hear me? Oh, good,
yes, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I can't see myself. I don't know. Oh well. That's a little different than Zoom, where I can't see myself once I'm sharing screen. But hello, everyone. It's great to have people from all over the region and even farther away. I see some Pennsylvania names. The Stroudwater Research Center is based in Pennsylvania, just barely, only a 10-minute drive to Maryland and Delaware. But we work all over the world. Our scientists have actually worked on all 7 continents doing research. So that's the first tier in our 3-tiered or departmental section of our organization. Education is our next department. I should say Stroud Center is 52 years old now. We're an independent nonprofit. Education department's been around for a little over 25 years. And then we also, more kind of recently, but about 8 years ago, added a watershed restoration department who work with private landowners and actually do restoration on their properties, especially a lot of farms, working with a lot of them. Let me go to the next page. There we go. So we want to tell you about some Wiki watershed things, and just like the others, this will be rapid fire type of giving you some highlights or a little teaser about some of these technological tools, technological educational tools that we have available. Many of these are also used by scientists, so they're pretty robust, as Sean alluded to, and funded in similar ways. Like Globe and FieldScope, I'm familiar with both of those. I recommend both of those. I've used them both in my classroom in the past, and then also in my grad work, and when I was a professor also. They're great tools too. So use whatever you've got. I always used to tell my pre-service teachers, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Take what's out there, make it your own, make it fit your teaching context and your students. Find the right pieces of these different tools that are best for you to help you reach your learning goals. So Wiki Watershed currently has 7 different tools within the toolkit, and there will soon be number 8, which I'll give you a sneak peek of. We're not going to go through all of these. I'm going to, like I said, go really quick through some of them, and then the ones I'll spend the bulk of my time on will be Model My Watershed and Monitor My Watershed, because those I think will be somewhat different than what you've seen so far. So you've got all these different tools. wikiwatershed.org is where you go to find all these things. We also have a bunch of curricula, and we're always building and pilot testing more curricula. Our flagship app, online app, Model My Watershed, is now on its 4th National Science Foundation grant. And that also means it has that many curricula that we've pilot tested all over the country. We currently have a group with a new curricula that's not here listed here yet on Wiki Watershed. It's in a different portal because it's still in the pilot stages. We're testing in California, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And then Monitor My Watershed has some lessons with it too, and we're building more and more of those over time. One of them that anybody can use, this is a simple simulation. It's called the runoff simulation. And if you want to look at land cover and infiltration rates, depending on different rates of precipitation, and also soils, you can change all of those things. And this is a really good place to start if you're thinking about the water in and out of a system or a certain location. So this is based on a really robust model, the same model that is one of the models in Model My Watershed. So you can check that one out too. That's the runoff simulation. It's a great place to start before you get possibly bogged down in so many choices of other things to do in Model My Watershed, which I'll show you. We have a water quality mobile app. Would you believe it? Nobody else had the name water quality when we created this. So we took it. We took that name. You can download this, and it similar to some of the things you heard about earlier. You can collect all the different things, the macroinvertebrates, the and do a simple rating on the macroinvertebrates and the health of the stream. You know, a lot of the chemistry things, a lot of the habitat types of things. And again, you don't need Wi-Fi or cell service to use it. It's just when you get back to your Wi-Fi, if you want to upload data, that's the only time you need cell service. It does cost $4.99. That helps us keep it up to date. But once you have it once, you don't have to pay for anything else. And there are no annoying ads or pop-ups. That's also part of the idea why there's a little bit of a cost there. And schools can get discounts too and put it on multiple devices. That's just a little more about that. A little more, yeah, we'll flip through those. Another tool we have working with Carnegie Mellon University for a different National Science Foundation grant is called macrovertebratesorg. If you're really into the bugs, this is where you want to go. These are gigapan images when you work your way through the key and down to the more precise levels. So these bugs were basically digitally sliced and then thousands of pictures taken of each one and then stitched back together. So you can rotate them all different directions and see, you know, how many you can even see the little hairs on them. It's amazing how detailed it gets. So check that out. You may have heard of our leafpack network. It's been around for a long time. It's a stream study technique that scientists have used since, geez, 1950s, I believe. Pretty standard technique. Bugs like leaf packs in the stream, decaying leaves. It's a shelter, but it's also a food source for some of them. And this takes you through that experiment. You can purchase the whole kit, enough for a whole classroom. That we don't manage the selling of those. Lamont Company has those available. All right. Enviro DIY stream sensors. This leads into some of our other things I'm going to show you more detailed. But we took what was a $20,000 to $25,000 stream sensor station that the USGS would put in a stream, and we've got it down to about $1,500. You can add more sensors, and that'll cost you more money. But we have an in-house electrical engineer, and she created that logger board based off the Arduino circuit board. So if you're into a makerspace, then this could be a lot of fun for you doing the programming. Here's some teachers in a training workshop. Here's what it looks like with a couple sensors, and you know, that goes in your stream, and you can either Wi-Fi or cell service send data constantly. Yeah, that costs a little higher there because it's also including the turbidity sensor. All right, and it looks like that once you put it in next to a stream, and you see the wires going down into the stream. You put a staff gauge there. There's some monitoring going on at a golf course. And here's an example of some data you can get from that. So I want to try to transition a little bit into data and data analysis, which is what I want to focus on, which is maybe a little different. Right, so that's just an example. All right, I'm going to go out of the slideshow and let me show you one other thing. This is going to be number 8 in the toolkit. This is our new leafpack stream study simulation. This is brand new. It's in that new pilot curriculum that we're working in right now. So you can have fun with this, play around with this. You've got 4 different streams you can test it. You can play your way through here. You can pull the bug. Bugs will show up here, and you can pull them into and that matching them up and identifying them. So that's a fun one. Look for that coming soon, and that'll be on this. So here we are live now on wikiwatershed.org. Right. So you've got all these major tools here. Your curricula is up here that I showed you. Right. Get that a little very quick. Yep. See, here's your curricula that you can access. In some cases, it's individual lessons. Some cases, it's units or mini units. So that's all available. What I want to show you first, launching from the stream sensor stations, would be this Monitor My Watershed. So here's our data sharing portal where leafpack data and the Enviro DIY stream sensor data goes into. Let's just take a look at, this is browse some sites. This is live. We'll see how my Wi-Fi does here at home. If it fails or goes too slow, we'll go back to the backup slides I have. Right? And there's sensors all over the place. These are our Enviro DIY sensors that people have deployed. And let's zoom in a little bit. Green tells me that there's data within the last 6 hours. Most of these are set. Let's pick this one. I know this one's in the Chesapeake Bay Watershed. Right. So Latort Spring Run, close to a little west of Harrisburg in the Carlisle area. Let's see what their data is going. What's happening there? All right. So here's a picture of where it's located, and it's information when it went out. This one has been out since February of 2020. Right. So this one's been out over a year, and you get all this kind of data. Fun data for students to analyze. And I see David Klein is on our webinar here. He's helped create some of the pilot lessons that go along with analyzing this data, and that's available. Some versions of it, pilot versions of it, are available on the curriculum site. So you can see something like, how about water depth? You can see it changing here over time. You can change the parameters. You can download the data. You can view it in a data table if you want students to do the graphing instead of giving them a graph for you. Let's take a look at a time series analyst real quick here. It should load. There we go. Loading. If it doesn't come up real quick, we'll just go back. No worries. All right. We don't want to wait that long on it, but that's something you can click on, and you can manipulate. What that does is manipulates this graphic for different time spans. You can zoom in, you can zoom out. You can see how this water depth in this case has changed. Obviously, these would be storm events, large storm events when you have big jumps. And then coming back down, we've got water temperature. Interestingly, what you can also do, yep, that one's water temperature, liquid aqueous equipment. Yep, this is water temperature. You can see if that one perhaps correlates to the water depth. Does the temperature of the water change when there's a storm event? That's an interesting question to really investigate. So there's these different, depending on how many different sensors you have connected, you would have different data. Most of them are set by default to send data automatically to this website every 5 minutes. So you can really have some fun with that sensor data. You can compare from multiple sites. Let me actually go back from here to here. You can compare different locations. And so if you want to do what I just showed you at one site, you can compare over time. So temporal variations over time. But you can also do spatial variations, spatial comparisons over time by comparing different locations of data, right? So you just pull up 2 different sites, wherever they may be, and you'll see those differences also. Let me jump pretty quickly to model my watershed. And this will be the one we'll finish up with. I'm looking at our time. So Model My Watershed works anywhere in the lower 48 states. Sorry, Alaska and Hawaii, not quite yet. But maybe in the future. So what I'm going to do is let's just go to the Stroud Center. Oh, it's going to go to my house right now, but let's go to the Stroud Center. All right, you can type in any address here, or you can type in any latitude and longitude coordinate if you want, and find any location in the lower 48 states. So here we are on the east branch of White Clay Creek. Okay. I want to turn on some stream layers. This is a high resolution stream layer. You can turn on lots of other things too. I can change the background grid. Let's put the National Land Cover Database on, and you can get the key here for what these colors mean. So the Land Cover Database and the soil groups, those come from USGS and USDA. You can toggle those on and off. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's also change I like satellite with roads instead of topography. All right. So green tells me there's forest. This brown and yellow tells me there's fields. Right? You can see farm fields there. But that's the different, some of the things you can play with. Turn that back off. Zoom in a little bit more. And center it a little bit for you. Right, so here's our complex. And right about there. How about we do this? Now let's do some modeling. So if your students have gone through MWEE, and let's say this is your school property or your nature center. I know we have formal and non-formal educators on today. Right, so let's say this is your property. And we want to, you can select boundaries lots of different ways. I'm going to do to do it quickly, a free draw. And we'll do a boundary. This is not exactly our property boundary, but it'll be close enough for our purposes here. Right. So this is an area of study that I've now created. And it will load. There we go. Now we get some more options. First thing we get, it's analyzing just this property that I've outlined. And we get all kinds of information. We get stream data. We get land cover data within there. This is what's happening just within our boundary, right? We get soil data. We get water quality data. If there's any point sources of pollutants that are there, there's county data about extrapolated from the county level about what types of farm animals might be within that county extrapolated down. We don't actually have 16 broiler chickens on our property. That's extracted down from the county data. There's climate data. Thank you, NOAA. This comes from NOAA sources and then put into here. There's lots of different data depending on where you're at. Okay. But then really what we want to do, very last thing here, we're going to model. So if your students, say you're a classroom teacher and this is your school, and you say, okay, we've decided that we need to put a best management practice on our school property to make our school property get better, to minimize runoff and promote infiltration, right? Here's your runoff distribution right now for the property. Here's our water quality information about total suspended solids, nitrogen and phosphorus that are running off. And I want to make some changes to this area. So I'll click over here, add changes. This is our rain event. We're going to simulate a 24-hour rain event. Here's going to be a big one, an 8-centimeter rain event in 24 hours. All right, it already recalculated our distribution. Boom. Oh, yeah. Red is bad. We want to minimize runoff, right? That red section got a lot bigger when I made it an 8-centimeter storm event. What if we chose to add a conservation practice? Like maybe we chose to do no-till agriculture on this little demonstration farm field here. Right? It'll calculate that change. I just put a BMP on our property. Right? It makes the change. There's a compare button up here. Let's do a couple other things. What if we also, this is an old mushroom barn that we use for storage. What if we put a green roof on it? It's hard to retrofit things with green roofs, but what if we did? What if we put a green roof on there, a vegetative roof? Let's see if that makes it a little bit better. We can do a whole bunch of different choices. These are scientific grade models. We've got some rain gardens on the property. What if we did we actually do have porous paving, but I don't think it recognizes it as porous paving. It's not that up to date. So this parking lot, and we also have all of our sidewalks, actually our porous pavers also. And you can compare that data. You can I did a whole bunch of different changes at one point in time. You could model as many different scenarios as you want and compare those. You say, okay, would it be better? Are we going to get more bang for our buck if we did a green roof or if we did porous paving on our property? So this will help guide potentially, or if we put a rain garden in, rain gardens are really popular. You can model and you'll know exactly the amount of change that you're going to create according to the scientific models. There's 4 different models, two of them are the major ones that are used in this one. The change in runoff and water quality that you can potentially create by using best management practices and putting them on your property. I know, for instance, like I said, putting a rain garden on a property is a pretty common thing to do, or putting similarly a school garden would do very similar things, with the amount of runoff and infiltration. So I want to stop there because I see where we're almost out of time, and give it back to Elise.
Thanks so much, Steve. I really wanted to make sure that we got that last tool though, because it's just so it's so great for especially bridging that connection between like investigating an issue to then like designing solutions and supporting students in figuring out what is going to be the most effective solution maybe on a school ground. So I'll invite all of our presenters. Thanks, Dorian, Sean, and Steve so much for this. And I'm going to turn the recording off and open it up for questions.
I see there's a question about, are there lesson plans and investigations? Yes. Some of the